Crash Bandicoot: The Wrath of Cortex, despite not being all too bad all things considered, was received awfully back in the early 2000s, to be honest. People really did not like this game.
This is literally the worst experience I've ever had with Crash Bandicoot. Moving around in this shitty sub. Oh, the fucking sub. Fuck, I hate it. It gives me PTSD just thinking about it. It is terrible. It is horrible.
And the main story Crash games would take somewhat of a short hiatus, from 2001 to 2004. There were 4 Crash GBA games and even a main console racing game, which I would like to visit at some point on this channel, but today we're taking a look at the next main story Crash game after Wrath of Cortex. A game that's infamous for being, well, not really a game. Today we're going to be taking a look at Crash Twinsanity. Now, in contrast to The Wrath of Cortex, which tried to follow a formula that Naughty Dog established, Crash Twinsanity takes the whole kind of linear corridor 3D platforming level and turns it on its head, presenting the player with an open 3D world for Crash to explore. This is actually apparent from the second you load into the game. You start out on Insanity Beach with the choice to roam around and explore the world. For 2004 Crash Bandicoot, this is actually really neat. It also becomes apparent from the start that the gems are now found in the overworld, which is quite different to the older Crash games. Yeah, because Twinsanity is more of an open-ended game, the boxes don't really count towards anything. And instead, the gems are used as an incentive to explore the world or complete optional side puzzles. I am personally not a fan of this kind of twist on the gems. It makes the boxes entirely useless, and the gems don't unlock any kind of hidden path or anything like they did in the older games. Funnily enough, they just show concept art for other features that didn't make it into the game. Why is that though? Well, Crash Twinsanity was heavily rushed in order to get a 2004 release, to coincide with the release of the newest Spyro game at the time, Spyro: A Hero's Tale. So, a lot, and I mean a lot, of stuff got cut from this game in order to support the 2004 release. This also meant that the GameCube version of the game would get cut, in order to favour development of the game itself. That's right, this game was that poorly planned and rushed too much that a third of the gaming market in 2004 did not receive a copy of this game. And that's a considerable third. Also, hopes were low after the backlash that Traveller's Tales received from Wrath of Cortex, and hey, Traveller's Tales also made this game, and wait, no they didn't. Turns out that Traveller's Tales Oxford Studios made this game, which were more of a completely independent game development studio. From what the Video Game Resource fandom tells me, Traveller's Tales Oxford Studios were a division of TT created with the task of reviving the Crash Bandicoot series. They were meant to make Crash Nitro Kart and Tag Team Racing, but those tasks were passed on to other game companies. I can see why Tag Team Racing was shoved to Radical Entertainment because of how rushed this game was, but why were they stripped from Nitro Kart? Who knows. TTOS must be at least a little bit self-aware though, because not only did they reference how the Wrath of Cortex basically sucked.
The check bounced. Are you sure? Well, the past few years have kind of been slow. Wrath of Cortex didn't do as well as we'd hoped, and...
But they also referenced how rushed the final game was in comparison to their initial vision of the game.
Come now, as we explore a new dimension! It should have been 2 new dimensions, but we ran out of time.
Alright, we get it. Moving on now, Crash controls, pretty poorly actually in this game, to be honest. You start out immediately with the double jump, which is nice, but there's no other way to unlock power-ups, so you're stuck with the limited mobility throughout the game. I wonder how they'll innovate movement then. The jumping in this game feels weird, and after a bit of thinking I think it might have something to do with the sizes of the boxes in this game. You bounce around like a fucking tennis ball when you so much as try to platform over bottomless pits on top of boxes that are way too small to try and predict a landing. And you can't even slide jump over them because they fucked that up too. Traveller's fails. How do you manage to fuck up slide jumping in a Crash game? That's like fucking up running fast in Sonic. Oh, wait. If you think that this game didn't do as well as you'd hoped, then at least this game let me slide and jump around normally. Also, yeah, I hope you appreciated the open world aspect of the game at the start, because you won't be seeing it again until the Academy of Evil at the literal halfway point in the game. Which means all that open world exploring you got to do for gems at the start is gone. We're just going to be sticking them at the end of levels for now. People call this game an open world adventure, but you're still going down a straight road. There's just the left and right this time. I will say though, traversing the iceberg lab with Cortex is great. Wait, what? Yes, as you can tell by this absolutely low detail yet somehow charming box art, this game sees Crash teaming up with Cortex in order to defeat the evil twins, two evil birds that exist as one of Cortex's many failed experiments. In the day and age of Twinsanity, these birds returned from the 10th dimension with the motive and power to destroy the world that Crash, Cortex and co inhabit. And this is where the variety in terms of gameplay is implemented. From the very first boss fight with Cortex until the very end of Twinsanity, you play through this game with Cortex, and it's quite entertaining if nothing else. The standard for Crash and Cortex gameplay sees Crash dragging Cortex along with a crystal, using Cortex to trigger switches, smash enemies with his head, and even kill enemies by throwing him towards them. It is fun. This even elaborates into rolling ball mechanics like in Wrath of Cortex, but somehow done even worse. Rolling around Cortex while he's stuck in a bloody barrel, and my personal favourite, skating on Cortex down a giant icy mountain. Slip Slide Icecapade is an absolutely amazing level, probably my favourite level in the whole game. The music, the humour, the controls, the music. Did I mention the music? The music for Crash Twinsanity was composed by an a cappella music group known as Spiral Mouth. And while the music here isn't nearly as good as Crash 2's or CTR's, it creates the same effect that the music in Crash 1 has, funnily enough. It complements the levels brilliantly, but instead of the music creating an atmosphere that's helped develop by the visuals, the music in Twinsanity complements the slapstick charm that the humour of this game creates. But Spiral Mouth still managed to make the music feel serious when it needs to, or even intimidating. I'll play some now and you'll see what I mean. The soundtrack in this game is love or hate. You talk to someone that's played Twinsanity and they either absolutely despise it, or they find it charming and just fucking awesome. Charm is also created in Twinsanity through the beautiful voice of Lex Lang as Dr. Cortex.
I've ruined the lives of so many, I can't be expected to remember them all.
Someone's at the fucking door. This is the first game to have Lang voice Cortex, and he made me laugh on numerous occasions actually.
Are those real?
This game is very relaxed and filled with jokes. Twinsanity doesn't take itself too seriously, and that's why I like its story. But even though there's a rushed story, half of Cortex's allies have turned on him for treasure, which is kinda funny. The evil twins appear when they want to, just to taunt Cortex, and Crash makes some rather suggestive actions. Yikes. Even Spyro makes an appearance to stop the old villains taking the treasure, which really caught me off guard the first time. Nice. Despite the rushes, there are still plenty of funny gags in this game, but when I say there's a rushed story, I do unfortunately mean there is a very rushed story. Yes, it's still enjoyable, but you can't really ignore it. There's a lot of plot holes in this game, even with the twins. The twins sometimes state that they want to do one thing, just to come back an hour later and say that nope, they're doing another thing now. Okay, cool, sure Twinsanity. I know that I said earlier how this game was rushed in order to meet a deadline, but every aspect about this game was rushed. Crash Twinsanity as it stands today is an unfinished game. There's too many bugs in this game, and especially too many that you'll encounter on a normal playthrough. Some people say they don't see many on their normal playthrough, but I found quite a few. And they were kind of easy to notice. Dying on a normal piece of map geometry despite having Aku Aku, cutscenes replaying themselves when reloading at a checkpoint, this bear in the chase sequence disappearing forever for literally no reason, the first boss bugging out with its shots, Cortex leaving behind his giant purple toy, this happening. Yeah, the whole game is riddled with bugs, which I need to clarify, yeah, I don't like. There are many people, both people with a fascination for breaking games and speedrunners alike, that love picking up this game in order to find its bugs. And there's a page with currently 600 known major bugs listed, and those are only the ones that have been found. I can't exactly say it hurts the game's credibility, but I don't like the glitches at all, and I think the game would be a lot better if it was more polished. Anyway, because Twinsanity is somewhat, open world, there isn't a map or warp room to select levels to play. Instead, you play through the first level you're thrown into, and at the end of that one level, the next one is set up for you. It makes everything feel connected, especially the narrative, which makes the whole experience more rewarding to complete, and more worth your time to invest in my opinion. Like, at the end of the first level there's a boss with Cortex, which ends with Crash and Cortex getting into a brawl. And this here? is the gameplay for the second level, well, most of it anyway. Then at the end of that, we meet the twins, and there's more setup for the next level, and so on. I won't talk about the story too much here outside of the bosses, because I don't want to give away too much of it, but it's definitely worth it, especially if you've never experienced Twinsanity before. We also do indeed get to play as Crash, Cortex and Nina in their own stages respectfully. Nina controls well, and her gameplay mainly consists of grappling up large buildings to jump around them and eventually down them, and Cortex's gameplay consists of spamming the ever-living shit out of anything on screen. Sounds boring, and kind of is, but for some reason, I absolutely love it. I mean, come on, the evildoers get to use Uka Uka instead of Aku Aku. How cool is that? Although both masks are absolutely useless in this game because they can't save you from TNT and nitro explosions, and the Aku Aku invincibility is laughable. Back onto the gameplay though, Cortex is definitely more fun to play than Nina, but I think I might be in the minority on that one. After all, his levels are just linear hallways crammed with enemies to spam, with an ammo count that seems to replenish itself, so why have it there in the first place? Cortex also has a headbutt slide and charge blast, and even an area of effect ground attack, but none of these are really used at all, so again, why really have them here in the first place? These areas of the game kinda serve the narrative I suppose, but they didn't need to. A standard Crash level would have done the job. That being said, I do really love how Cortex told Crash to tie the airship to something secure, so Crash tied it to a bus. That's a cool little gag to prepare the level, but you honestly could have came to this area, did what you needed to, then moved on. But they stretched it out into pretty lengthy levels, with two bosses, Dingo Dial and
You are in detention!
Her. Near the end of the game, you travel to the 10th dimension, a place that sits between the 9th and 11th dimensions, which were both meant to be included, but again, rushed. This is basically a completely backwards version of the Insanity Island we're familiar with. There are also alternate levels here from the chase and slide levels from way back near the start of the game. Then there's the biggest final level in the game here, which isn't too impressive. Just some platforming and some gems, with a really buggy beat 'em up section. Then there's the final encounter with the evil twins in the world they inhabit, the heart of their stronghold lair at that. Oh right, bosses. The bosses here in Twinsanity are pretty weak. Honestly, some of them aren't bad, but all of them come across as unfinished. I mean, the engine boss fight doesn't even have a health bar. Dingo Dial has an incredible boss fight that's very innovative, but I'll save that for a top 10 Crash bosses video that I either will or won't make because I'm completely unorganised. I also really like Madame Amberly, but not for the fight itself. More or less just the idea of Cortex fighting a boss that's literally his old headmistress from his Academy of Evil. She still treats him like shit too, exactly what I'd expect from an evil headmistress.
I see you found employment as a barber.
I'm an evil scientist!
The first Cortex boss is super buggy, and the Uka Uka boss is somehow just a worse version of the Dingo Dial fight. But it has a nice ending cutscene at least, with Uka Uka and Aku Aku teaming up for like the only time in Crash Bandicoot history, and even the evil twins are quite bad for a final boss. Don't get me wrong, it's better than Crash 2's final boss, but still, I remember this boss being absolutely amazing, phenomenal, one of the best Crash bosses. However, replaying Twinsanity just revealed its flaws, that it's a mediocre and buggy boss that follows onto a mediocre ending, yeah. At least there's this cutscene, and oh, the music for the final boss is really good. One of the best final boss musics in Crash history actually. And that basically concludes my Crash Twinsanity review. Crash Twinsanity isn't too great. It's more on the worse side than the good side. But if this game was given a fair chance in development, it'd be so much better. That being said, the music is good, Cortex is amazing, this is probably my favourite variant of Cortex, and it's not a bad game by design, just insanely rushed. Traveller's Tales did their... no, I'm sorry, that's just too rude. Traveller's Tales did their best at this game, and all we can do is thank them that this unique game is part of the Bandicoot's legacy. After all, it's not the worst part of the Bandicoot's legacy. Anyway, this concludes my review for Twinsanity. Thank you for watching another Crash Bandicoot review from yours truly. If you're new around here, then be sure to subscribe and show some love, and go check out some of the other videos. Sorry that this video came out a little later. I've really been into collecting games lately, so I've spent a lot of time playing older games and looking to expand my game collection. Also, I've been playing a lot of Crash 4, and I'd love to make a video on that too. Oh, and yeah, this video was expected to be released on the 5th of September. However, I was ill the entire week before, and I'm still a bit ill as of recording this now, which meant I couldn't record any commentary at all last week. Of course, I tried to anyway because I'm a psychopath, but it lacked clarity too much and was a strain on my throat, so I just left it until I got better.
I've ruined the lives of so many. I can't be expected to remember them all.